Corbolic V2. This is a super safe and effective natural anabolic. Not only is this product going to help you increase protein synthesis, which basically means muscle recovery and growth, it also may inhibit myostatin, which is a protein in your body that is known to inhibit muscle growth. This is a complete natural anabolic that works through multiple different pathways, has multiple trademarked ingredients. If you are a natural athlete looking for that edge, Corbolic V2 is what you need. Get yourself some.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Pro Physique Code. We are going to go over show day essentials. We're going to talk about everything from, some strategies. We're going to talk about what things mean with the backstage stuff, with the onstage stuff, the prejudging, the finals. We've got a lot of around the show stuff to discuss today. So Lexi, Evan, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing good, doing good. And I like this topic too, because we have a lot of newer competitors that listen to the show and a lot of people that have competed before, right? So it's a good topic to go over. I'm prepping a few girls right now for their first ever show, and a lot of them are going through the same things, nerves, what to expect. And so this is just a good, fun topic to go over, especially for this time of year.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of these questions, so this topic kind of stems from a client of mine that sent me like a ton of questions a couple weeks ago. But they were all really good, like just very basic questions. But I think a lot of these questions, as like a new competitor or somebody who's never competed before, I think everybody has these questions. And I think sometimes it's like you almost are afraid to ask these questions because you feel like, ooh, I should know the answer. So we're going to address all these kind of basic questions and then also go into a little bit more detail and depth on some things as well.
Good plan. Good plan. I think the year kicking off, I've had a few of these conversations as well. And as a coach who's gone through this thousands of times with athletes, we know what to expect. And
Yes.
sometimes it's hard to understand that the competitor is anxious about things we are comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it just helps to have the conversation because they don't know what happens. They don't know, why do they get moved on stage? They don't know, should they go to the athletes meeting in the morning? They don't know, all these little things that seem, filled with anxiety, are just something pretty, normal for us, pretty pedestrian. We don't stress over it as much anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes just that, like, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes that can even be more nerve-wracking, going into something blindly and just not even really knowing what to expect. I know for some people that actually makes it better, but like for a lot of people, I think not knowing just what to expect is what really creates the nerves around that first show. And that's why, not to like, because we could make this a whole topic within itself, but that's why I always generally recommend for a first-time competitor, if it's their first season, if we can do more than one show, like that would be my preference as a coach. And most athletes, I think they would always agree with that too, because that first show, you're just kind of getting your jitters out, and then you feel a lot more calm, like you can take a deep breath afterwards, you know what to expect. And then it's usually like makes the second show a lot more fun because you kind of have a better idea of what to expect.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, Lex. I mean, I say it all the time, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know, and don't expect to know what you don't know. Ask questions. That's super important. If you don't know, ask questions. And here's also the deal on show day. We probably can't answer every question for you, especially if we're not there. So if you have questions at check-ins and things like that, that's what everyone there is for, is to help answer those questions for you.
Absolutely. Well, we can kind of start with that. So, question about, every show has athlete check-ins, right? Generally the night before. So we can kind of just quickly touch on like what is athlete check-ins, what to expect there, because I think it's a lot simpler than people think. It's not a long ordeal. You kind of just go in, check in, get your number, get measured height-wise. So let's talk a little bit about what goes down with that.
Well, first you got to understand the way the organization works. There's two things happening at a bodybuilding show. One, you have the NPC. If we're talking about an NPC show, that is the governing body. They are not at the show. Who is at the show is the promoter. Okay. So when you go to check-in, first things first, you have to have an NPC card. You have to register with the NPC. The local promoter has sanctioned their event from the NPC. So now you're checking in with the show. So they're like, oh, cool, Lexi's here. Do you actually have an NPC card? You can't walk on that stage without an NPC card. The NPC gets their piece. Then the promoter is like, okay, you signed up for these classes. And so, yeah, like if you're in a division where height is measured, they will measure your height. If you're in a division where weight is measured, like bodybuilding, classic physique, I don't think they're doing men's physique at the NPC yet,
No, they're
but
not.
at the pro level they are. They will check your weight. They will put you into classes. And here's another thing that a lot of people don't realize, because I've had some of my athletes be like, Coach, should I sign up for class B or class C? And I'm like, well, sign up for whatever you want, because when you check in, they measure you.
Yeah.
Um, they will also ask you, let's just say it's your first show and you didn't sign up for True Novice. They will ask you, hey, do you want to register for this True Novice class? So that's another thing that they're going to do at check-ins, is just make sure you're not eligible for any other classes you're not doing.
Yeah, and something I want to point out too, I've had a lot of girls ask me if they like what they need to bring for like to check in. So bring your NPC card that, and you don't have to print it out. I mean, you can, but just have it saved on your phone. Have a screenshot. That way you can show them your NPC card because they will ask for that. And then I know that sometimes some shows will, like the promoter on the website will say, bring your suit or your suit bottoms.
Yeah,
I
say
don't
that,
know
yeah.
about you guys, but I've never been to check-ins where they've actually like had you put on your suit and checked. I mean, for peace of mind, if you want to bring like your suit bottoms, you can, but I've never been to a check-in where they have athletes put on their suits. If anything, that's just going to really slow down like the check-in process. So you need your
I've been to shows where they do that, Lexi, but it's been
okay.
years. A few years
Yeah.
ago, they were, especially in states like South Carolina, Georgia, where they were a little bit more, demure. No one's
Demure.
checking a suit bottom in Miami.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. So maybe bring your
They
suit
all still
bottoms.
say it though, bring your suit bottoms, but I've never
Yeah,
seen
but
it checked. No.
I mean, you can't. You look at the Bikini Olympia. There's girls up there with T-backs. So what are they going to say at this point, right? So now I will say, the new division, they may very well be checking suit bottoms because they have a very clear 50% coverage, and we've seen already some of the shows the girls are not following that.
Very
And
true.
maybe because they can't yet because they don't have suits, but that could be potentially what they do.
That is true. For Fit
And
Model, that may very well be true. Yeah. So I always say it like for the athlete check-ins, bring your NPC card. That's basically what you need. You'll get in line. They'll, just verify the classes that you've entered. They'll look at your NPC card and then they'll measure you. If you're a bikini competitor, they'll measure you. Get used to sometimes you're going to do multiple shows and maybe be measured at a slightly different height too. I feel like that happens. Sometimes they may measure you at like 5'3" and then the next show like 5'2.5". Sometimes I hear girls talk about that. So that's basically all check-ins is. And then you'll usually get like a bag with just some goodies and your number, which that's very important. Get that number and put it somewhere safe because you don't want to lose that. And then you're pretty much free to go. I mean, it doesn't take long at all.
it cannot take long. It depends on the show. If it's a pro-am and things like that, sometimes they can really
Lexi's used the
drag.
Florida shows that are run very well.
Yeah.
I
Now,
think
here's the
so.
other thing.
Yes.
If you do not have your NPC card when you show up, if you forget something like that, if you forget to register for the show, any of that stuff, they will allow you to all do that at the show as well. So if you forget something, if you forget to sign up for tanning, if you forget things like that, don't freak out. 99% of these promoters will do everything they can to help you get on stage because they're not going to turn down money. Let's be real with that. They're going to take it. So they're going to do everything they can to help you with that. So the goal is to have everything kind of scheduled beforehand. But if that doesn't happen, it may take a little bit longer. Your timings may not be the best, but it'll still happen. So don't freak out if you forget something. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually had a show where I attempted to do the DIY tan for the show. So I didn't purchase the tan through the actual like show promoter. And then come to find out like the night before the show, I just realized I was not going to be able to get myself dark enough. So long and behold, I ran down to the show promoter, like tanning company, just asked them if I could pay then and there. And they're like, yep, you're totally fine. So yeah, that's a good point, Evan. They're generally going to do anything that they can to help you out on show day as an athlete.
And the big thing too is the NPC card. There's a lot of people that forget to get their NPC card because you don't need it when you sign up for a lot of the shows. But there's always, at every show I've been to at least the last 2 years, there's a QR code right when you walk in at the front desk. It says NPC cards, and you can scan that. And if you've already paid for your NPC card, you don't have it, you can scan that and log in with your information, put your email address in, and it'll pull it all up. So don't worry about any of that stuff. They make it at least the last few years, they've removed a lot of the difficult hurdles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk a little bit too about what classes to enter because that's another question. And I get this question fairly frequently from even like non-clients of mine, and I usually always say, chat with your coach, but I think most coaches probably have a very similar kind of thought process behind what classes to enter. So let's talk about if you're a first-time competitor, what we generally recommend for the classes that you enter.
Well,
I
I
mean,
could go over this too. What we're going to recommend here is what the actual rules are. I've been to shows to where there's certain promoters that bend these rules a little bit. But so the stuff we tell you here is going to be generally what the rules are, especially when it comes to novice and true novice and stuff like that.
well, and also you got to consider the finances of the competitor, right? So used to be if you did like one class, then each additional class would be like half the cost. Now they're always, I think, the same. So if it's like 150 a class, it's 150, 150, 150. So if you're doing 4 classes, so it comes down to what they can afford. I always tell people, in my opinion, you should do every class that you're eligible for, especially at your early shows, right? It just it going to a bodybuilding show takes months and years. And so getting up on stage multiple times, in my mind, it's like you're already there. Go out there multiple times. You get a little more, stage time. You get compared to other people. Sometimes you might be in a class that's very small, and then you get to go out against a class that's a little more competitive. Um, as an example, I think the most classes I ever did at one show was 4, and that was because I was a true novice in one division and then a novice in another division, and I just did both, and I was a master's in both divisions, so I was able to do like all these classes. Um, and it's funny, I was literally walk off stage, I would line back up and go back out a few minutes later, right? So it was fun, but you only get to do true novice once. So if it's your first show, do true novice. True novice and novice are sometimes the most competitive classes because they usually keep the heights pretty small. So I've had girls get like second or third in true novice and win their open just because the way the cookie crumbled, the girls that were in their novice weren't in their open.
Yeah. And that brings up a good point, Paul, like to talk about kind of what each one of these classes are, right? So you have, if we're talking about most things, we have true novice, which means you have never competed in that division, the NPC, before. That's true novice because you were a true novice. Then you have novice. Novice is if you've not won your open class before. That's novice. And then you have open. Open, you're against everybody that's going to be in your height class. Now, each one of these, you have different height classes, and those are all broken down based on the number of shows. That is the unage restricted version. Then you have master's classes. Master's classes are a little bit different. The number of master's classes depends on how many people you have in the show. Some have 35 and over, some have 45, some have 50, some have 60. It really just depends on the number of people that register for the show on how many of those classes they end up having. So I think that's a good kind of general breakdown. And inside each one of those, it's broken down by height.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's a great breakdown. That's a great breakdown. Yeah. And yeah, every show can be a little bit different. I think at the very least, every show has true novice, novice, open, and at least one master's class. But some shows have multiple, like masters over 35, masters over 40, masters over 45. And I will say, like, let's say you're 50, right? And you could technically qualify to compete in masters over 35, masters over 40, masters over 50. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I find that when clients, if they were to compete in all 3 of those, they kind of end up going against a lot of the same girls in each class. So I always recommend doing at least one of the master's classes, but do you need to do all of the ones that you qualify for? I mean, that's up to you. Again, it depends on finances, but you probably don't. It is important to keep in mind, though, that the open class is going to be what nationally qualifies you as well, unless like if you're a master's competitor and you're looking to do master's nationals, that's a little bit different. But if you are generally wanting to go to a national show, you need to get top 2 in your height class in your open class. So even if you get top 2 in your or in your class, like in novice or true novice, that does not nationally qualify you. It's only in your open class.
That's a good point, Lexi. That's a
Yeah.
really good point.
So that's why I
To
generally
qualify for Masters Nationals, so everyone knows, you just have to compete in an NPC show. That's it.
Yeah.
And Paul, you hit the nail on the head earlier talking about people. A lot of people ask me, well, which class do I have the best chance of placing the best in? And the answer to that is I got no clue. I was going over it today with one of my male competitors. He has not competed in the NPC before. He's competed in some other organizations. And I was recording the video. I was showing him the differences between the novice and true novice, specifically what his show looked like last year. And in his height class in the open, he's a men's physique guy. I think he had four, but if he would have competed last year, he would have had 4 guys in his class. But at this particular show, there was only one height class for novice, and there were 32 people in it. So if you look at it from that perspective, he would have a way better chance of placing well in that open class with 4 people than in novice, which had, or actually, I think it was true novice, actually, had 32 people in it.
Wow.
They
So-
didn't split it up, huh? I see.
They didn't split it up. So
For
you know,
open, the rules are usually if they have 12 or more, they're supposed to split to or whatever. There's a number. But with true novice, I mean, that just seems kind of silly. They should have split that up into
They
2
should
of these
have.
classes.
But
Yeah.
that's why we're going over this right now. This is the way typically things work.
Yeah.
And each show's a little bit different because I've had some athletes, because the rule, unless they've changed the rule, is you cannot compete in novice if you've won your open class.
Actually,
I've had
you're not
athletes
supposed to
last
compete
year-
in novice if you've won in novice. If you get first place in novice, you're not supposed to do novice anymore.
But I had a girl last year that won her open class multiple times, and she went to shows after that, and they told her she could still do novice because she did not win an overall.
I've heard
In
that
open.
too. But if
So,
you look at the rules,
The
it's
rules don't say that, but some promoters bend those rules to get.
and I've seen girls get
More
third
interest.
at nationals and then be doing novice 2 weeks later at a local show. And I'm like, what are you doing here, man? You almost turned pro and you're out here taking trophies from
Yeah.
novices.
Now, I told my athletes, I was like, don't do it. I don't care if they say to do it. Don't do it.
I
Like,
agree.
leave that for.
Even if it's allowed, because technically that person's never won an overall or whatever, just the spirit of novice competing. Because so
Yes.
for me, my first show I ever did, I went to a show and I saw that there was a novice class and I was like, oh, I get to compete against people that are also new to the sport.
Mhm.
Cool. And I did that class the next year.
That's
I would have
what's
felt
good.
like an ass if there was a guy that just missed his pro card by a spot that decided to do novice bodybuilding again, and it just, so I don't know. For me, it's the spirit of what novice is for. It's for getting more people into the sport,
Yes.
not for
And
trophies, not for
not for
trophies.
trophy hunting. Don't go trophy hunting at novice, people. Like, especially if you've competed multiple times here. I'll tell you, me, truthfully, I never did one novice or true novice at any point in my amateur career. Not because I didn't. The main reason I did is I wanted to go against the best. That's why I did it. But also after my 3rd or 4th show, I was getting pretty good, and I didn't think it was fair to go against people that had never really competed for or never won before. With them.
Yeah, no, and
I don't
agree.
want to take that opportunity away from them, because if that would have happened to me, I probably wouldn't have come back.
Yeah.
Like, if I had somebody that looked like me at that point going against them, it would have been really discouraging. And I want more people in the sport, not less. Don't go trophy hunting. If you want to go trophy hunting, go win an open.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, so now we have our classes, and let's talk about, and I think this is a great question because honestly, I think back to before I first competed and I probably didn't know what this meant either. And to us as coaches, this seems like a very simple thing. But let's talk about what it means when you have athletes on the actual stage and they are being moved around. So the judges are having, certain people go into the middle, certain people go out to the edge. Let's talk about what that means. I know that it's not always 100%, of like some shows are a little bit different, especially like OCB versus NPC, but let's talk a little bit about what it means when judges are switching girls around or guys in a lineup on stage.
Lexi, do you want to go straight into that, or do you want to kind of go out how they do like initial comparisons and individual routines, and kind of how that process is laid out first?
Yeah, let's briefly do like a quick little rundown on, I guess, that. And that's hard though too, because I feel like that is different show to show. I've been seeing a lot.
Well, there's a rule. There's a rule, Lexi.
Oh, okay.
So over 7, I believe, right?
There's a rule. So if there's more than 8 competitors in a class, they're supposed to do groups first, then individuals.
Okay.
Less than 8 competitors, they do individuals and then comparisons.
Okay.
Okay, then that makes total sense.
So if you ever see a class and the first girl comes out and hits the pose, you go, oh, it's a small class. It's less than 10 or whatever the number is. I think it's 8. It could be 10. But
it's enough for multiple call outs. I know that.
Yeah. So that's why when you see some like, like we've been at the Arnold the last couple of years, and when they just start coming out for their individuals and they haven't done a group yet, I'm like, oh, it's small, right? And Junior USA's last year,
Hmm.
there was a couple of classes that had like 5 or 6 girls that they just start coming out. And next for our individual presentation in class C, and I'm like, what the heck? There's not even 10 in C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why I think it's really good to go over this type of stuff, right? Because there's a lot of confusion when it comes to when they do initial comparisons and all that. So to take, like, we'll take that 8 number, for example. So let's give a good example of you're walking up on stage for your very first time. Okay. And let's say you have 12 girls that are in your height class. Then what they're going to do is they're going to pull you out in a group based on your numerical order. So if there's 12 girls in your class, they're going to pull out the first 6 and they're going to compare them in the group of 6 in their numerical order. So you're going to front pose. If we're talking about bikini, front pose, front pose, and they'll leave the stage. Then the next group comes on, front pose, front pose, leave the stage. Then you will get your opportunity. Every single person there has the opportunity to do their individual routine. Then after individual routines, they'll call everybody out the diagonals, and then they'll do what's called call outs. And if you have those 12 groups, that means there typically be 2 groups in call outs. You have your first call out, then your second call out. If you're in that first group of numbers they call out, that means they're looking at you to possibly win your class. And then they will start moving you around and things like that. And then whoever wants to go over that part of it. Or I
Yeah, I
can
mean,
continue.
as far as judging goes, the NPC has gotten fairly consistent with this. It used to be some judges would do this and some wouldn't, but because of, well, at least I think we tend to attend the shows where the judges are pro or national level judges.
Mhm.
I haven't gone to many shows where we don't have a pro judge anymore.
Yeah.
Um, they are doing what I call centering, meaning they're placing the higher placing athletes towards the center of the stage. Sometimes if you're on the stage, they'll actually have numbers for like finals where they want people for awards. That doesn't mean that's where you place. But, if there's an even number of people and there's 2 splitting the center, that's usually 1 and 2, right? And then outside of that is usually 3 and 4. If it's an odd number and there's someone in the dead center, that's almost always the winner, but maybe someone next to them as well. That happened at the
Mhm.
Arnold. Someone dead center did not win, but the girl next to her won. And I think that the judges just didn't want to move them around any more than that. So yeah, I don't necessarily love that they do that, but that's one way for the judges to control the narrative that understand the division better. So yeah, that's typically, but be warned, until finals, you don't know.
Yeah.
And when they do the call outs too, they call you out based on your numerical order. So when they do call outs, they will call you out in your order. So where you're placed initially when they do that first call out doesn't mean that's where you place. Then they will start moving you around and comparing you. So where you start initially is not where you're going to finish in most cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally, the more center you are in the lineup, like towards the end before they dismiss you on stage, the higher up you are placing wise. Now, I have seen this be very different though at like OCB shows. I know there was a show I attended like a year or 2 ago, and the head judge liked to see everybody in the middle at one point. So those girls were being worked pretty hard and vigorously on stage because they brought everybody into the middle at one point. So but I would say for most like NPC shows, the closer to the center you are, the higher up you are placing wise. Just a little general a note too. So if you are in a lineup and the judges are comparing you, and you are at the very end of a lineup, right? So you're on the edge. You need to make sure, and you should always make sure that you're angling yourself into that head judge. So I see girls do this all the time where there will be maybe a line of 6 or 7 girls on stage, and they're on the very end, and they're basically just posing straight on towards the audience, which may seem fine, but you have to put yourself in that position of the head judge at the judging table and understand that like when you're posing head on towards the audience and you're at the very end of a lineup, it is really hard for them to see you and to judge you at that angle, right? So it may feel kind of weird, but do make sure if you're at the end of a lineup in comparisons that you are angling yourself a little bit towards that head judge.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The head, especially in the NPC, the head judge kind of dictates the movements. The smaller organizations, they don't technically have a judging structure where 1 or 2 judges are dictating kind of how people move. So I've promoted and I've, judged in other organizations. And typically what the head judge will do there is go, hey, do you want to see so-and-so? Like, so for example, if I have somebody that's close, I would want to see them side by side. They wouldn't put them side by side in the middle. They would put them side by me, right? They would move them closer to the judges that wanted to see them. So there were times, and this happens a lot in the natural bodybuilding world. The winner will get put on the end. They'll basically isolate someone and go, we don't need to see you anymore. You're our winner. Who's second and third? Okay, then they'll start. So you'll leave prejudging at some of these natural shows, and you'll have no idea where you placed. You might have some idea based on what because this is something else competitors can really do a good job of. If the judges keep looking at you, that's a good sign.
Yeah, especially the head judge. This
They'll
is super,
smile
super
at you.
important.
They'll wink at. They'll give you. You'll know that they like you.
You will know.
They'll like look at you, and then they'll look at the judge next to them and whisper something, or they'll point. They'll fucking point at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had
Like-
judges take pictures before.
Like I know when I won my pro card, I knew I was going to win it because Tyler and Ethel were sitting right next to each other, and they looked at me, looked at someone else, looked at me, something. They both started looking at me, and then looked down and wrote. And I was like, okay, I have a good feeling about this one. Like you know when they're looking at you, it's obvious.
So I'll never forget this. So you guys got to go back in time before I ever had anybody go to the Olympia. Before I had girls turn pro, but I didn't have a ton of experience. Daraja won the overall at Tampa in August, and then we went to North Americans, and I was so like anxious. I got real close, like right behind the judges, right? And when her class came out, and there was like 40 girls in her class, I remember when they walked out in groups, I heard one of the judges lean to the other judge and goes, "That's the girl from Tampa." And I was like, what the fuck? And then they literally brought the whole group out, put them on the line, and how's my memory? 2-4-3, come to the center. I was like, oh, it's happening. Like they literally put her right in the center. So like they remember shit, and you can, as a competitor, you can stare off into space or you can look down. They will mouth stuff. I've even asked competitors, could you, oh yeah, they were talking about me. I could hear them saying my name. I could hear them whispering stuff. Sometimes the audio is like it going up onto the stage. So yeah, it doesn't hurt to pay attention to that. And I always
make
tell
sure you're
people, if
looking at the
someone's looking
judges.
at you, look back at them. Give them a little.
Yeah. Or look at, I've been getting this question a lot recently from newer competitors about like, should I make eye contact with the judges? And
Yes.
I mean, yes, ideally, yes, but I know for some people making eye contact will really throw them off. Like if they're on stage and they see somebody not smiling or whatnot. So I always say, if you really have a hard time making eye contact with somebody or it's going to throw you off, just look at like their forehead or look right above their head. I mean, from their point of view, they're not going to know you're looking at their forehead. It's going to still look like you're making eye contact.
Yeah, and you don't want to make it awkward. You
No,
want to scan and just let them know you're engaged. But yeah, I mean, to me, looking at the judges is a sign of confidence. You want to be like,
absolutely, absolutely. Well,
let's
and
talk about this because this is something we rarely talk about. We've never talked about on this podcast, but judges not even looking at you during your routine.
ooh, I have heard
Yeah.
cases of this before. I can't think of like clients specifically that have told me this, but I feel like I've heard other competitors like being almost upset, feeling like, oh, they didn't look at me or I wasn't even getting judged. I've definitely heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, look, it can be a positive or it could be a negative, right? The routines aren't judged, and they're looking at things most of the time to pick you apart with that. If you are clearly a winner with that, clearly, I could see them maybe not looking at it during that time frame with it, or it can mean that you're not really in the mix with it. But it's frustrating.
I have to be very honest, and I don't think anybody's gonna like to hear this. Like, I feel like there maybe are some rarities to this, but like, if you are truly that good and you have that it factor, like you almost as a competitor, you have to give the judges a reason to want to look at you, right? Like they're sitting there judging thousands of athletes all the time, and it's like you have to give them that even in your confidence and in your aura. Like when you step on stage, the moment that heel hits the stage, give them a reason to look at you, demand that attention. Because I know that's a big thing. We've had Sandy Williamson on this podcast before, and she mentioned that something that really stands out to her as a judge beyond just the physique is like someone's confidence and their aura and how they carry themselves, right? So, if you're really that good, like the judges are they can't help but not look at you. You know what I mean? And I know that's not the
Right.
answer anybody wants to hear, because I do feel like even like every judge, I feel like personally should pay the respects of at least like looking at the person, but you also have to give them a reason to want to look at you.
Absolutely. You got to
100%.
be good enough for them to
Well,
look at you, which
and
people don't
this
want
is
to
the
hear.
other thing. You said it very well there, Lexi. These judges, so most of the time, the people that are not looking at the posing routines, I'm going to say it, are the male judges. Sandy, Becky, they make a lot of eye contact during posing routines. They give a lot of smiles and a lot of nods. A lot of times, the male judges, from what I've seen, kind of just have like internal conversations with each other. But here's the reason why. They've already seen you, they've already made up their mind, and they've already taken their notes. So like when I was judging, I would judge when I was judging. And at finals during the routines, that's when I would take my notes for feedback. And I think that's what Sandy does. That's her chance to go, oh, hey, I like your suit. Tan could be better. Conditioning is good, but not full on, like those kind of things. The men judges, because you got to remember, like they have seen so many physiques. They make their decisions like this. Prejudging is going to go really fast,
Mm,
especially at a show like Tampa Pro, where the last couple years they haven't even done individuals in the morning.
Yeah.
yeah.
They've just brought
Yeah.
everybody out in groups, did a call out, see you tonight. Some of those classes last 5 minutes, not even, because they have to get through all the amateur judging. And then they do the routines at night. And at night, those people have been judging since Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's been 3 days. So it's not personal and the routines aren't judged. They're judging you when you're next to the other athletes.
That brings up a good point too, Paul. If you're talking about they don't look at you during finals, here's also the sad part. A lot of the judges aren't necessarily sticking around for finals. The
I
decision's
would
already been made.
say
Like
that.
there's no judge outside of overalls. There's very rarely any judge, especially at the amateur level, almost never judging that takes place at finals outside of an overall.
No, when people ask me like, oh, should I come back better for finals? I'm like, unless there was an indication, like unless they've called two off and brought you back out, then they might look at you again at finals. In a rare instance where there's a tie, but in the most case, it's going to be that's it. They've made their
Yep.
decision. If you win your class, yes, you will get judged live again, and the judges will be paying attention to that.
But
Mhm.
I've been to shows too where the head judge doesn't end up being there for the overall
Many
with
times,
that.
many times,
That's a
especially
lot
these
of
big
times.
the big name pro judges that
Mhm.
have already judged the pro show that was earlier in the day. They'll hand off the duties to another local judge for the overall, and they may or may not indicate who they want.
Right. Well, let's talk about this is a question I get, and I'm sure you guys get this all the time about so at a show, obviously we coach mainly like female competitors, a lot of bikini, and bikini's always the class that goes on generally last at a show. They always start with the males, and prejudging, at shows it always says prejudging is going to start at this time. So what do you guys, I'm curious, what do you guys tell your athletes in terms of when they should be backstage? Because I know I think it kind of depends on the show. And if, it's a notoriously huge show in your bikini, do you need to be backstage right when the show starts? Probably not. But for some people, it's peace of mind to be backstage right when it starts. So what do you guys typically tell your athletes about when they should be backstage in relation to when the show starts?
If they're a new competitor and it's their first time competing, just be backstage when the show starts. You're going to cause yourself way more anxiety and worry. If it's a big national show, there will be a live stream involved with that. And if it's a big national show, it's not your first rodeo going on stage with things.
They
So
also have that
all that
app
stuff
now that
changes.
says like,
Yeah.
calling all bikini, calling
Oh,
master,
muscle
the
wear.
muscle wear. Yeah. So that does help too. But yeah, I'm a worry wart on show day. I'm like, can you get backstage? The other thing that you can do is I like to go to check-ins the day before and ask the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Like so this year at the Arnold, I knew the girls were going to go on late. So I told my girls, don't even bother coming to like 10 because the show started at 8. And last year we were done by 11. But I saw the numbers and it was double the men than there were the women.
Yeah, when in doubt, I definitely think even as an athlete, like it never hurts to ask like check-ins, how many athletes are in this show, or even, just being backstage. Like there are going to be expediters, people backstage with clipboards. Like when in doubt, just ask them like, hey, do you have any idea of when maybe bikini will start? I mean, they may not have an answer, but It doesn't hurt to ask. I also think if it is a big show with a live stream, it is totally worth it. Even as an athlete, purchase the live stream so that way you can watch it, and you know exactly who is on stage when they're on stage and when, when you need to kind of start to prepare to be on stage. Because I mean, there are some shows, I'm thinking like Republic of Texas a couple years ago, Paul. I mean, gosh, it started at I think 9 or 10. Bikini didn't even go on till like 2. So if I
Yeah.
would have been backstage at 10, I would have been really miserable sitting back there that entire
Well,
time.
especially those shows like where they go, okay, we're going to do all the NPC men, then we're
Uh-huh.
going to do the pros, then we're going to do the
Yeah.
NPC women. And this is where, as a coach, experience can really help, going to shows and you know how they run the shows. Also, likewise, Tampa, because if you looked at
Yep.
the starting time for Tampa this year at 8 a.m. and you're in bikini, you think, oh, I have a while, all the men. Well, they didn't do any individual presentations. They were done with prejudging by 9:30. I know girls that
Yeah.
were just showing up and the show was already over.
Well, I remember the year I did Tampa Pro, there were girls backstage crying because they missed their True Novice class because it went,
Yeah.
I think that was the first year
It went
that,
so fast.
yeah, that was the first year I remember it went way quicker than it normally did because they didn't do routines at prejudging, because notoriously in the years past, I think it had gone a lot slower. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that
I
for peace of mind, you probably want to try to be backstage around when the show starts. But when in doubt, ask the promoters the night before at check-ins, get an idea of how many athletes are in the show. I mean, worst case scenario, you get to the show early, and then you know what? You're going to have a lot of extra time, and you can always go back to your hotel room, or you can always go chill out in the crowd. So that's kind of, that's not the worst case scenario.
also a conversation I have with my athletes. I'm just straight up with them. They can choose what they want to choose with that. But if it's a pro-am, and a pro-am means there's a professional show and an amateur show at the same show. So you have your normal just NPC shows, but then you have pro-ams, which is a mix of amateurs and professionals. For most shows, if it's a pro-am and they have multiple pro divisions, you're going to have a long day because the big chunk of that middle day is taken up by the pros. So you'll be there early in the morning and you won't get out till really late at night. So, for some people, they really like it because there's more competitors a lot of times. There's more hoopla around it, more vendors, more people in the seats. People enjoy that, right? But for some, it makes the day drag.
Well, it's
Yeah.
also usually better judging. You're going to get
Mhm.
like higher quality of judges. The venues are usually better when there's pro shows attached. I mean, so there are perks. It's a trick I learned a long time ago is, put your athletes in the pro shows because you get really good venues and shows and, things like that. And,
You
a show
probably
like,
you get more consistent judging for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you might sacrifice the day because
Mm-hmm.
if you go to a smaller show, they're not going to rush you through prejudging. They're going to let you take your time. They're going to take, I'm telling you, Tampa last year, they were like, next on stage is Masters 45 men's physique, numbers bing, bing, bing. They would go, okay, so and so move. All right, see you tonight. Like it was literally that
Mhm.
fast. They were
Yeah,
not.
Lexi,
Was quick.
we went to Lakeland last year, and how long did that prejudging
Oh,
take? They ran and
that's
compared and moved. You would have thought it was Mr. Olympia up there
But
Evan.
that's
for
kind of
every
what you
division.
want for an NPC
Yeah,
show. You want that.
I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, it's
it
funny
was.
though, because
Yeah,
I remember that morning I was even kind of worried of like, oh my God, I need to make sure I get there well ahead of time, for bikini. And then when we were there, Evan, I mean, gosh, we were there, we were sitting there for hours before bikini went
it was
on.
like 3 hours before bikini went on.
Yeah,
They were
yeah,
comparing every class
yeah.
for
And
5 minutes.
that wasn't even a pro show. So
Oh,
yeah,
I've seen Sandy judge True Novice for 15 minutes, like just picking them apart in third call outs of True Novice, so it does
see,
come down to the judge and how much time they have. The women's only shows, I know they take their time more because it's only women, so they have the ability to like judge the classes, longer. Not that they necessarily need it, but, they pick them apart a little more.
yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about what to expect backstage, because this is like a thing I think a lot of people who have not competed before like wonder about. And of course, every backstage is going to be a little bit different. Especially Tampa Pro, like we talked about that show. I would say that show has probably the most kind of authentic quote unquote backstage, because if you've ever been to the Tampa Pro, it's at the Hyatt Grand Regency in Tampa, and the quote unquote backstage is on the second floor in like this little meeting room. And then when you go to the actual backstage, you walk down the stairs and you go to this like little small little backstage. It's like right off of the kitchen too, I think, of the hotel, which is kind of weird. But but every backstage is a little bit different. But let's talk about kind of what to expect backstage, what it's like, besides the fact that it smells a lot like Protan or a lot like tanning solution and glaze. Let's talk a little bit about what it's like.
So from my perspective, the first thing to do when you go backstage at a show is find the expediter and find the entrance to the stage and make sure that you are within earshot. There's nothing worse than finding a quiet spot away from everybody and they're calling, you know, figure class B and you can't hear them. Some of the shows like Tampa are amazing because they've got that whole upstairs area. They've got multiple rooms. They have a TV showing the stage, and the expediters are lining the classes up well in advance. They're like, hey, I need bikini getting glazed. I need men's physique lined up here. I need master's men's physique on the stairs. The thing about Florida, if you haven't done a show in Florida, it's the best state because they all share resources. So if you're at a Tim Gardner show, the backstage people are the same people that just did the Clash the week before. And so all the promoters share these resources and they'll actually help each other out. So if Tim Gardner's promoting a show, he'll be the promoter, but at the next show, he might be at the judges table helping. And then likewise, like David will be, you know, maybe he's at check-ins and expediting, and the next show he's judging. So they've really got it down to a science in Florida. Their backstage people communicate very well. The only time I've ever run into a problem in Florida is like the Atlantic Coast show where they have like music playing and they can't even be heard over the sound of the music. And they're like, bikini novice, line up.
Oh, is that just maybe because this year I remember like they said it was an expo. I mean, it was kind of a small expo. Is that why maybe?
I don't know what it was this year, but a lot of times now they have a DJ near the stage and they put those DJ speakers by the stage. And so I've had some issues with like being able to hear, but it's not a problem for me. I'm more worried about the athletes that aren't familiar with the backstage shenanigans because I keep an eye on what's on stage and I'll ask the order of events because every now and then bikini's not last. Like wellness will be last. Probably fit model's going to go after bikini now. So, but you know, as a coach, I'm like, I get anxiety on show day. I'm running around. I'm like,
I know it's funny on show day. I always know you're just running around everywhere. You get your steps in for sure. But I also think that like to that point, I know some girls that will wear headphones like when they're backstage to just get in the zone. And I get that, but also you should be very careful if you're going to do that because it's
don't take one off.
Yeah, take one off or like wear AirPods and just put one in. Like I get wanting to put on music, wanting to kind of get in your zone. That's what some people thrive with, but you know, best before stage. But you also need to be able to hear, you know, in case they're trying to hunt you down or flag you down. So I think that's important. But I agree with you, Paul. I think find a spot backstage where you're not like off in the middle of nowhere where you can, you know, be found where you can hear things. And then I always say, just like put your stuff down, camp out. You should not be running around backstage, standing up, you know, for a long period of time. Like you should just be able to sit down, kick your feet up, relax. And honestly, backstage, I feel like is pretty low key when you're not lining up and getting ready to go on stage because you're just kind of sitting there, you're chilling. There's rice cakes everywhere. There's bottles of peanut butter everywhere. There's honey everywhere. Like it smells like the tan solution. That's kind of the lovely part of the backstage aura.
And look, if you're newer competing and they tell you to line up and do the stuff, just go do it. The longer that you compete, the more you'll be able to read between the lines with a lot of this stuff and know, okay, I'm good. I don't need to get up there yet. But earlier on in your competitive career, if they tell you to go somewhere, just listen, just get up and go do it. If they say go get glazed, go do it. Like just do what they say and you won't get things missed. The longer you do this and the more shows that you do, you know, you kind of see the way that the solution is made and you can kind of make a little your own decisions and be completely fine with it and learn to optimize things a little bit better. But until then, just listen for your number and you can just go when they call you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I said this earlier, but don't lose your number. I feel like that's so easy to do. But when you get it at athlete check-ins, like put it somewhere,
Put
attach
it
it.
on your suit. There's no
Yeah,
reason not to
attach
just
it
put
to
it on
your
your suit
suit.
right away.
Yeah, it's one of those things I feel like it's so easy to just like forget and then be backstage and be frantic. So just yeah, put it on your suit, put it in your
I
show day bag.
remember, I'll never forget Dilru, one of my long clients. She was at Amateur Olympia in Orlando lining up. And she texted me. She's like, Coach, I can't find my number. I think I left it on my bed. And so like she came backstage, handed me her room key. If you guys have ever remember, the Olympia was across the street at the convention center. So I'd
Was
have to
this
hoof it to the
Orlando?
Hyatt, go
Um,
up the tower, and I was like, I was so proud of myself. I got it back to her before she had to go on stage.
wow,
I had an athlete do that
that's
last year. She left it in her car and couldn't remember where in her car she had left it. That was
Yeah.
thinking through everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So put it, if you just tie it to your suit that right when you get it, when you go get dressed the next day, even if you take it off for a little while, you'll have it then. It'll just be a reminder. But yeah, the numbers, and you'll know if someone lost their number because they'll be on stage with like a paper one.
Yes, yep, I've seen that before. But well, so here's another great question, and I don't know if we want to end on this one or we want to do more after this, but question about what is a coach's role on show day? And of course, I know that there's not like just one straight answer for this, but let's talk a little bit about like what our job is as a coach on a show day for a client. Because we as coaches, we would love to be at every client show in person, but it doesn't always work out where we can do that logistically. So we go to some shows in person, but we also coach athletes virtually on show day too. Then that works out fine. So let's talk a little bit about like as coaches, we what our goal is on show day with the athlete.
I'm waiting for you, Evan. You go first.
Show day's athlete is if we're there in person.
Well, a little bit of both, because I think, all of us, we go to shows in person, but we also all have client. I mean, we have some weekends where we have clients at multiple shows, and obviously
You
we have
can't be,
some,
yeah.
yeah. So we'll talk about a little bit of both.
Yeah, look, every client's a little bit different with that, and that's why working with clients for extended period of time is good. Our job as a coach is to make sure their anxiety is as low as possible, to be accessible for them, and to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to be as successful as they can. Um, Part of that is letting them know when to pump up. Part of that is letting them know you don't have to be constantly shoving food in your mouth the entire day, just like everybody else is. And you don't need to be walking on stage eating gummy worms because that's not going to do anything for you. Um, it's to be that impartial eye, but also be their support system. And like Paul, I think you put it right. Like you're like a bride on a wedding day, right? Like everything needs to be good. Stress is low. Let's make sure everything's good. Whatever questions you have, let's get them answered. For some clients I have, that is talking to them a lot of times all day long. For other clients, it's way less than that. And it's like pulling hair or pulling, or begging them to be able to get on the phone and talk about what they need to do for show day. And every client's a little bit different with that, right? It's really just to be there and be supportive and make sure the plan is executed to the best of your ability.
Yeah, Paul, you have always said on show day, your motto is be a diva, and I totally agree with that. Like, obviously, don't be like a bridezilla on show day, but it is your day where you work so hard for that day. I think it's good to, especially like as coaches, our job is to take the stress off of the clients and make the day as enjoyable as possible
Yeah.
for them. And every client needs a little something different. I know some clients, they like to be a little bit more keep to themselves on show day. They don't want to be, texting me 24/7, but I also have some clients that are texting me a lot, just for reassurance, just to, for clarity. So it's kind of depending on depends on what you need, I think, as the athlete. But I think overall as a coach, we need to be accessible. As you said, Evan, I think that's very important. Even if we're not there in person at the show, like just being accessible via phone, FaceTime, text. I don't think I've ever had a client that I haven't been at their show in person tell me that they didn't feel like they couldn't access me. Like normally I'm texting my clients a lot on show day, and sometimes I
Yeah.
almost feel that I'm being annoying, but I think being accessible is important. And then also as coaches, just us easing your nerves, making sure you're staying on top of, the water, the sodium, the food. I think a lot of people overestimate how like by show day, you're going to wake up and you're usually just going to be putting the final touches on things, right? It's not like, what you eat leading up to stage is going to drastically like change things. I mean, it may fill you out a little bit, etc., but it's not like you're going to wake up on show day and your physique is going to change dramatically within the next like several hours, right? So it's a matter of just keeping stress low, leaning on your coach to help to keep that stress low, and just following kind of the plan at place.
And people aren't going to want to hear this, but unless you are a high level pro or you are a super high national level competitor, then a lot of what you do on show day is really not going to change that much of your overall look. It's really not. It's really not. Everything leading up to that matters. Now, if you're a high level pro with a ton of muscle and you are dry and water really a lot of stuff matters there at that point with it, and things can go flat when you're trying to nail things incredibly perfectly. Things can really matter with that. But outside of that, a lot of it is keeping stress low. And I think another important part as a coach, which I didn't mention the first time, is setting a schedule for your clients, which is something I do. So we obviously communicate first thing in the morning, and then I let them know when to reach out to me again. I'll say, of course, reach out to me in the meantime here, but let's say I'm talking to them at 6 a.m. I'll say, well, let me know how you're feeling at 9:30.
Yeah.
And then we drink some water. This is how much water to drink to this point. Let me know how you're feeling at 9:30. Well, what are we doing at 9:30? I'm not sure yet. That's why you're going to let me know how you feel at 9:30, but here's what you need to bring with you.
Yeah. And I know some clients really struggle with this, especially like my planners and my type A girls, about like they'll ask me a day ahead, okay, well, what am I, what should I bring? What am I going to eat at this time, etc. And I can, tell my client what to bring food wise to pack, and we can outline a plan, right? But sometimes on show day, we are going to have to adjust things depending on how that athlete looks at a given point in time, right? I'm not going to be able to tell a client on Thursday or Friday, okay, yeah, at this time on show day, I'm going to have you eat this amount of peanut butter, one rice cake. Like a lot of those show day food prescriptions are very much so going to be based off of how that client looks in the moment, right? And I know that that's
And how they feel.
yeah, how they feel, how they look in the moment, and also the timeline of the show. If the show is running like way behind, that may kind of alter things as well.
Yeah.
So I know some people really struggle with that. They want to have like a finite plan, and know that plan like a day ahead in advance. But as a coach, if we were telling you on Thursday or Friday exactly what Saturday was going to look like in terms of food, like we would almost be doing you a disservice, right? A lot of it is depending on how you're looking and feeling in that moment.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I had a client that competed last weekend, and we fed him up and tried some stuff the night before the show, and he was a little spilled over in the morning. So guess what happened? That plan changed that morning on what we did. We pulled a lot of carbs out of his earlier meals and helped him dry out throughout the day, and he ended up being in a really good spot. And it's that type of stuff matters. But if everything kind of goes according to plan with it, a lot of the stuff you do outside of a few of your normal meals is more for your brain and to relax than for your physique.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. That's one thing I've learned about athletes. And if you're my athlete and you're listening to this, you're going to laugh. I find that direct instruction and being told what to do on show day is very good for the athlete, not letting the mind wander. So, like, while I'm a very flexible person technically through prep, show day, I have a very specific plan to follow. And that's why I find that athletes on show day do better when they are given tasks. I want you to do this at this time, and I want you to do this at this time. And they feel like they are working towards something, versus like, what do I do? What am I supposed to be doing right now? What should I be doing? They're, like the brain can kind of mess with you on show day. So yeah, my goal for show day is the work is done. The most changes we'll make on a show day is, yeah, like maybe we'll add in some sodium, some water if they're flat. Maybe I'll say, hey, let's go back to the tanning and let's touch you up. Your tan is starting to dry up a little bit. It's starting to get a little light, and if we have time, we can go the tanning right there. Cool. Get a touch up. Oh, you know what? Your hair, let's fix that up a little bit. But these are just like little minor adjustments. We'll go through posing a couple times. I'll even, like, if they're a newer competitor, I'll practice, like you were talking about, Lexi, I'll put them on the end and I'll stand over here and I'll say, pose to me. I'm the head judge. Little things like that you can work on show day. But yeah, we're not making any drastic changes. One of my favorite things to do if I'm there in person is, after pre-judging, have a good chat. If we've got 4, 6, 8 hours before we're back, I might have them go do a little circuit in the gym. I might have them go eat a big meal. Um, you know, it just depends how they're looking. If I feel like they can be a little bit fuller, but again, if you take a bodybuilder who's been doing cardio and training and diligent with their plan for months, and then you just put them in an auditorium and tell them to sit there for 12 hours, I don't think that's good. So that's why I like, hey, I need you to go after each meal, I need you to take a 10-minute walk. After each meal, I need you to do 10 minutes of posing, put your camera on and send me a video. After prejudging, let's go do a little 30-minute circuit in the hotel, or if there's a gym nearby. You just want to keep the brain and the body active so you don't have time to like wallow in your kind of anxiety. And like you said, there are some athletes that, coach, I'm good, and you don't hear from them again. And they walk out under those lights and you're like, damn. And sometimes that's a good sign for me. When I don't hear a lot from an athlete, that means they're confident and they're ready to go. When someone's like, hey, coach, can I have 2 sips of water? I just ate 1/2 of my banana and I feel gassy. And someone knocked on my door, and you're like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
they're
Yep.
stressed. They're
Yep.
stressing.
Yep. Yeah, yep. And I also think to this point too about show day stress. You know, you learn this over time about your own self as a competitor, but especially if you're a first time competitor, you may have like 10, 15 people in your immediate life that want to come to your show and support you. And like, I love that for you. However, don't be afraid, like, because for me personally, that would stress me out. And as much as I would love people to come and support like that, and like I'm very grateful that people would want to do that, like that really stresses me out. So, you know, if you are somebody too that knows like that having so many people there for you to watch you is going to stress you out, keep things on the DL, or, you know, just don't maybe give out your show details to a ton of people. And I know that that sounds, I'm not trying to sound mean or anything, but I know a lot of athletes that if they have a big group of people there to watch them, it also stresses them out, or they almost feel like they have to entertain that group of people, especially after prejudging, right? So that's just something to consider as well.
Well, I've even had a conversation with an athlete like, hey, I really feel like we needed a couple more weeks. I'd like to move your show to this date. And they're like, I can't. I have 30 family members coming.
Yeah. That's happened a lot of times.
And I'm like, well, I guess we know what we're doing.
Right. Yeah. It's just all about knowing the type of person you are. Cause like again, I know for me, I don't want 30 plus people coming. Like as much as that means the world to me, that puts more stress on my plate. And I don't want to deal with that on show day. I just
Well,
don't
I
want
think even us as coaches, like in the last show I did in 2023, if you didn't know me personally, you didn't know I was competing. I didn't put it on my social media. I didn't talk about it. I just showed up and did the show. And then I talked about it, because even with social media, the amount of messages and good luck today and hey, how are you feeling today? I know it seems genuine and nice to hear that, but it can also feel overwhelming. And then it also can feel like, how's your show going? You're going to kill it. You're going to win. And then you start to feel a sense of obligation,
Yeah.
and you can feel like you're letting people down, which is not the case. So,
absolutely. And I'm sure too, like you guys get this as coaches sometimes, and this could just be my brain wandering, but like I never want a client to think that, okay, if like to your point, Paul, you didn't vocalize the prep. You never want a client to think like, oh my God, I can't reach out to my coach. He's in the thick of prep right now. He's really struggling. Like, oh, I don't know if I should reach out to him about my question. Like you just never want your clients to have that thought, right? Because I think we could all agree, like we are all athletes, but we are coaches first, like, you know, and we never want prep to jeopardize our ability to be a coach and be present. So sometimes I think that's part of it too.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are there any other like little questions that you guys wanted to address pertaining to show day? Anything that we didn't talk about or cover?
I mean, we
I
could
think
talk a little bit about the post show stuff. Like the one thing that I'll say is this: treat the show day like the whole day. Don't be in a rush to get the heck out of there. Stay and walk up to the judges table, especially if you're in bikini and you're already there at the end of the show.
Yeah.
You know, I've had girls like where the show was going to be like 20 minutes longer and they're like, oh, I just want to go home. And I'm like, we can literally talk to the judge in 20 minutes. Now, if you have friends and family that came, I get it. Go to dinner. If the restaurants are closing, go to dinner. But like for me as a coach, my job isn't done until I've gotten up there and gotten feedback for my athletes. And that's a big part of it.
And that goes back to what you're saying, Lexi, about especially like like if it's your first show, I get wanting to have a bunch of people there and support you. It's going to put a lot of stress on you. And then if it's something that if you get in the sport wanting to make the most out of it, and it's not kind of a one and done sort of situation, and you want to get feedback on there, the more people you have at the show, you're going to feel obligated to leave and go spend time with them instead of staying and getting feedback. And if you want to be good in this sport, the feedback is important. Like now, there are some situations, right, to where we already know what the feedback is. It's like you just need a lot more muscle everywhere. You just need to be a bigger person, or you just need to be leaner. So there are certain situations there it's not quite as important as others. But if you come in and you're pretty spot on and you're trying to go far in this sport here, then you need to treat the whole day like a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to like I've had clients in the past, their families there, they have young kids and they're like, "Oh, my kids are, not behaving. They're really tired. I can't stay for feedback." And yeah, that is tough, but yeah, ideally you
Well, I've even done it where I'll stay and I'll make sure I just
Oh
have
yeah, yeah.
pictures and
Yeah.
then I'll be like, hey, number 37, she was bikini A, and they'll pull up their notes. And so like that's something that you can also do. But if possible, plan to speak to the judges because there is value in getting FaceTime with someone that's going to recognize you and recognize the improvements you made, and they're going to be invested in your process. You'd be shocked how good the memories of these judges are. They're going to be like, oh, I judged you 2 years ago in Tampa. You look so much better. Like, so, and not to say that that's necessarily going to improve your placings, but there is a level of accountability when judge asks you to make a change and you make it, you're going to get
Judges
rewarded.
like seeing improvements.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
The judges want you to be the best version of yourself. They're not rooting against you. They want to see everybody get better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually excited because you mentioned post show, Paul. That's my I'm working on it right now. That's my presentation for Command the Stage is like prepping for the post show and things to think about. So, which speaking of which, I think this podcast will be the last podcast that comes out before Command the Stage because this will come out on
Yeah.
Monday. And we have Command the Stage that upcoming weekend, which I'm super pumped for. So, yeah, lots of exciting things coming up.
Yeah. We'll have videographer there and also photographer. So we're going to have a lot of content surrounding it.
I know. I'm so excited. One of my clients, I know she listens to this. She's coming in all the way from Portugal and she is excited. She actually emailed me yesterday and she's like, "Hey, I really want to try out these like supplements. Could I ship them to your house and could you bring them to me? Because I don't think she can get them over there." I'm like, of course, of course. So yeah, she's going to be coming from Europe.
Very
So
cool.
excited. Yeah. It's
So
going to be,
is that DNP and Diana Ball and
oh,
Yes.
supplements. No, she's like,
come on, Lexi,
oh,
Drug dealer.
you're selling Anavar on the black market.
yep, no, she's gonna be purchasing some white powder. No, actually, it's a
Oh, she's that kind of party girl.
Oh, straight up cocaine. Good for
Oh,
you, Lexi.
sweet.
no, it actually is legit. It's well, no, it's
Is that
funny.
why you have a Mercedes?
Oh yeah, of course. I'm doing some underground things. Yep. No, she's it's actually white chocolate macadamia protein from PE Science, so it is white. It is a powder, but it is my favorite protein. She knows I always talk about it, so she's like, "Can I order some? And then could you just bring it to me?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So
Whatever you say, Lexi, it's what they're calling it these days. The kids in the street.
sure.
White chocolate Colombian
Do you
powder.
need to chop it up with a credit card on a mirror?
Oh goodness, you guys. Well, probably a good spot to end on. Anything else you guys want to put out there on this topic or last thoughts?
Can I come over for a midday pick me up?
Of course, Evan. I mean,
Yeah, if you guys
but-
really want to get the most out of your fat burner, do a line of it.
oh my gosh, you
Oh,
guys.
this is fun.
It'll give new meaning to the term core burn.
Oh my God. All right. Well, if you guys have listened this far, we appreciate it. Drop a YouTube comment. And hopefully we'll see some of you guys listening on the following week at Command the Stage.
You sure
Yes,
will.
ma'am. Lots to come. And then we got shows coming up.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
All right. Later, guys.
Bye,
Ciao.
guys.